Hi, welcome to Learnovative Agile and Scrum video series. My name is Vijay Bandaru. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, certified team coach, and certified enterprise coach from Scrum Alliance. We create these videos to help you understand the concepts of Scrum and Agile in the easy way, and it helps you to implement them in your day-to-day projects and product development. In this video, we are going to cover Scrum Framework Flow. In the previous video, we have covered what is Scrum, the definition of Scrum, what are the elements involved in Scrum, all these things. If you haven't watched the video, please use the link in the description of this video. In that video, we have explained what is a framework and what's a complex problem, different problem domains. So Scrum is a lightweight framework that helps individuals, teams, and organizations deliver value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. Complex problem means unknown is more than known. So different problem domains we have explained in the previous video. In this video, how the elements of Scrum are interconnected. The artifacts, the Scrum accountabilities, 3 accountabilities, and 5 events, and 1 activity, product backlog refinement, and 5 values, all these things, how they're interconnected. That's what we are going to explain by taking an example. So whenever you want to build a product, first you should know for whom the product is being built. We call them as stakeholders. So usually stakeholders include the customers and users. So in this example, we are going to take stakeholders who are senior citizens who are living alone without any help. And they are facing some problems with managing their medical needs. So our stakeholders in these examples are the senior citizens who are living alone without any help, and they are facing issues with managing their medical needs. So whenever you want to build a product, you need a Scrum team, which is a combination of product owner, as we discussed in the previous video, product owner, Scrum master, and a group of cross-functional developers. Developers means not just programmers. They all include programmers, testers, UI, UX people, database people, testers, all these people together called as developers. That means this group of 3 people called Scrum team will understand the problem of these stakeholders and build a product in iterative and incremental way. So how does it work? Let's understand. First, the product owner understands the problem of these people. So these are guys, senior people, senior citizens living alone. They don't have any support to help them in their medical needs. So based on that understanding, the product owner will create a product goal. Product goal is nothing but a long-term objective, which explains what problem you are going to solve and for whom, all this high-level information. So where will be the product goal? The product goal will be created in the product backlog, which is the first artifact. For example, this product goal is to help all the senior citizens who are living alone without any support to manage their medicines seamlessly, cost-effectively, comfortably, safely, securely, and timely, which is a complex goal. For a complex goal, it is difficult to identify the requirements, all of them at the beginning itself, because complex means unknown is more than known. So what happens is the product owner constantly get in touch with the stakeholders to understand the needs and put them into product backlog as PBIs. We call them as product backlog items. So these are nothing but the requirements related to the product. And not only capture those requirements, product owner also prioritizes those requirements time to time. So this prioritization happens continuously ongoing job. So the way prioritization happens is the requirements which are valuable, important, critical, urgent will always be on the top of the product backlog. Important but not immediately urgent will be in the middle of the product backlog. Nice to have features will be always pushed into the bottom. So this way of prioritization will help the product owner to spend the money and the time on the most important items of the product. So how does it work? The product owner will take the help of developers to estimate these things. So they can use any estimation techniques. Scrum, as we discussed in the previous video, Scrum is a framework, which means intentionally made incomplete. It doesn't insist you to use one or two techniques. So usually a lot of teams use story point estimation techniques. If you are not familiar with story point estimation, I have explained in a different video. You can go through that video. So based on the information of the value, cost, and risk and other dependency information, the product owner will decide the order of these items. So the developers will help the product owner to estimate those items. Once they have enough items lined up, they start sprinting. Sprint is a container event, so which consists of the other 4 events: sprint planning, daily scrum, review, retrospective. So according to Scrum, the recommended sprint length is less than or equal to 1 month. Why only less than or equal to 1 month? Why not more time, like 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, like that? The reason is shorter sprints enable more transparency. Shorter sprints help you to get the customers connected more frequently. Shorter sprints help you to control the cost of change. Shorter sprints will help you to enable the flexibility of scope changes. That is why Scrum recommends 1 month or less is a recommended sprint length. So the Scrum team decides the sprint length according to what suits for them. Usually short enough to get feedback, long enough to create the value. So that is how the Scrum team will decide the sprint length. So within the sprint, the first day event is sprint planning. So what happens in sprint planning? Generally, sprint planning comes with 3 topics. Why we are building the increment, what can we do to achieve the sprint goal, and how we can achieve. So in the sprint planning, the product owner will explain the topmost few items of the product backlog to the developers. Based on that, the developers will decide how many items can be pulled into the sprint backlog. That means the product backlog order is decided by the product owner. Out of all these ordered items, how many can be pulled into the sprint backlog will be decided by the developers. How do they do that? Based on the past performance, like usually called as velocity, based on the best velocity, worst velocity, average velocity of the last 3 to 4 sprints, and the current sprint capacity. Capacity means how many public holidays are there any people taking personal time off, or developers are attending some outside Scrum activities like training or attending some hackathons, like that, based on that information. For example, here the product backlog includes senior citizens can register to the application. They can log in whenever they want to buy medicines. They can search for the medicines based on some criteria like the drug name or disease name, something, or based on a prescription, like that. And they can view the list of the items and they can make some payment for medicines what they want to purchase. They can track the order, cancel the order, reschedule order, like that. So let's say the developers decided top 3 items we can build in the first sprint. So the top 3 items, which are nothing but registration, login, and search, they will be pulled into the sprint backlog. That means sprint backlog is a subset of product backlog, which consists of the items that are selected for the current sprint to implement. So obviously, which means the sprint backlog is owned by developers. Sprint backlog is owned by developers. And product backlog is owned by product owner. Now, once the sprint planning is done, the developers will have a clear idea on what's the goal they want to achieve as part of the current sprint, and what are the items they have selected for the current sprint, and how they are going to implement a high-level plan. All these things are part of the sprint backlog. So they start executing the items. Execution is nothing but making the items completed by doing the required work like front-end coding, database coding, Java coding, programming, testing, integration, documentation, whatever that is required to complete the item. So as part of that, every day there will be a 15 minutes of daily scrum. So it's a quick meeting for the developers to check the progress of the work towards the sprint goal and make a plan for next 24 hours. It's a daily inspect and adapt opportunity. Somewhere in the middle of the sprint, after the planning and before the sprint review, they do an activity called product backlog refinement. The product backlog refinement purpose is to understand the upcoming items in the product backlog, probably targeted for next sprint, check with the clarifications with the product owner, understand the dependencies, and if the item is too big, break into small item, estimations, reordering, all these things will be part of the product backlog refinement. I'm going to do a product backlog refinement separate video. By the time they come to the last working day of the sprint, whatever items that are completed in the sprint backlog will be part of the increment. How do they know about whether an item is completed or not? There will be something called as definition of done. So the definition of done is a quality criteria that describes what is the criteria to be achieved in order to call an item is done. Something like all the acceptance tests must pass, unit testing should be done, functional testing should be done, code review must be done, code review feedback is implemented, performance testing is done, regression testing is done, browser compatibility testing is done, any documentation is done, something like that. So any item in the sprint backlog that satisfies the definition of done will be shown to the product owner then and there throughout the sprint. So all those items that are satisfying the definition of done will become part of the increment by the end of the sprint. What do they do with the increment? On the last working day of the sprint, there will be a sprint review. The purpose of sprint review is to showcase the increment to the stakeholders. So the Scrum team will invite the stakeholders. Scrum team will participate along with the stakeholders. So this increment will be showcased to the stakeholders as a working software. So when you show them the working software, they get to know how the product is shaping up, how the features are coming up, so that they can give some feedback. That feedback, again, product owner will capture and put it into the product backlog. If that feedback is important, valuable, critical, urgent than the existing items, the product owner will put it on the top. If the feedback is important but not immediately urgent, he can put somewhere in the middle. If that feedback is nice to have, the product owner will put it into the bottom of the product backlog. That is how the feedback will be captured. That means the sprint review purpose is to inspect the increment with the stakeholders and get their feedback adapted into the product backlog. After the sprint review, they go to the last event of the sprint on the last working day. After the review, the retrospective will happen. The purpose of sprint retrospective is to inspect people, processes, tools, techniques, structures, templates, all these things, how they have helped in the current sprint, and is there any improvement that we can do as part of that learning. So that means the primary difference between sprint review and sprint retrospective is sprint review is to get the product inspection done. The retrospective purpose is to get people, processes, tools, techniques, inspection done. So after that retrospective, the sprint is concluded. Immediately they go to the next sprint. Because in the previous sprint, backlog refinement, they have discussed and estimated and keep some items ready. Those items will be pulled into the sprint backlog in the next sprint. Again, the same cycle continues. They will execute those items. The increment is created again. That increment is shown to the stakeholders in the sprint review. Their feedback again pulled up into the product backlog and the retrospective is done. So that means if you closely observe, in Scrum, we are working like this, like a spring. Each circle represents a sprint. When you expand each circle, it looks like this. It starts with the planning and everyday daily Scrum, last day review, followed by retrospective, which is called as iterative. Iterative means repetitive. That means you take a small amount of time, fixed unit of time called sprint. Within that, doing the planning, daily Scrum, review, retrospective, again, taking the same time box and doing the planning, daily Scrum, review, retrospective, which will improve the process. Because you're doing the same thing again and again, it will help you to improve the process. At the end of every sprint, you're creating an increment. So every sprint, you will get an increment, which is called incremental. Incremental means add on to existing stuff, which will improve the product. Because of constant continuous feedback from the stakeholders, customers, users. That means, in a simple terminology, you can say Scrum is an iterative and incremental framework to solve complex problems by generating value to the customers iteratively and incrementally. So any problem you can take, any domain, it could be software or it could be manufacturing or automobile or communication. Anywhere when you find a complex problem, Scrum will be able to help. So the elements involved in Scrum, we discussed in the previous sprint. There are 3 accountabilities called Scrum team. You can find them here: product owner, Scrum master, and the developers. And there are 3 artifacts in Scrum: product backlog, sprint backlog, and increment. And there are 5 events in Scrum. Sprint is a container event, which is less than or equal to 1 month. Within the sprint, first day sprint planning, that is the second event. Every day daily Scrum, that is the third event. Last day sprint review, 4th event, and sprint retrospective, 5th event. These are the 5 events. And 1 activity, which is nothing but the product backlog refinement. And there are 5 values in Scrum. They are focus, openness, respect, courage, commitment. So throughout the journey of their Scrum implementation, developers, product owner, and Scrum Master follow these 5 values so that trust can be established within the Scrum team. When trust is established, they'll be able to implement the 3 legs of empirical process control, which includes transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So at the end of every sprint, there are 2 things happening: an improved version of the product compared to the previous sprint, an improved version of the team with respect to their rapport, behaviors, trust, the tools they use, the processes, the communication, and all. So that is why Scrum will help you to solve complex problems by building adaptive solutions in an incremental and iterative way. At the same time, Scrum also helps the team to improve their practices and people, processes, all these things. I hope you enjoyed this Scrum Framework Flow video. If you have liked this, please subscribe and please share the video. Also leave a feedback. And in case you are looking for any public or private Agile, Scrum and SAFe related training inquiries, please use this information and we are happy to help. Thank you so much and have a nice time.